Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Anomaly Sea Ice Challenge with the transhumanist paragons of Pandroth. Last time we left off, after acquiring ourselves two ghouls, Midnight and Jay, we also survived a deadly death pall that let all corpses on the map arise as shamblers. We even managed to kill a revenant that broke out of containment. On top of all that, we also had our first encounter with a Sightstealer, and finally we discovered some mysterious grey flesh, indicating that somebody in our colony is not who they seem to be. And that somebody might very well be our genie prisoner who is currently being interrogated by Ellie, although for the time being at least without success. Nazim, by the way, is still with the Empire as part of a small quest, so scanning, research and anomaly studying will have to be taken care of by Vulek and Ellie. Especially the scanning part will be of some importance in this episode, as we desperately need a new source of steel. And after already encountering one in the last episode, another Sightstealer is now revealed, and that is not entirely surprising as the one that we killed last time around let off a howling shriek, and as we can see here, this has attracted not one but in fact several more. However, we have also learned last time around that these Sightstealers are very much glass cannons. Especially our ghoul Jay with the tough trait should have no trouble taking one down in one-on-one combat, and with a bit of firing support from Maniac, Vulek and Elpis, we should have the upper hand here. Unfortunately though, it looks like we have several more Sightstealers coming in, so our ghouls will most likely take a bit of a beating here to start the episode. Nonetheless, that is exactly what they are supposed to do, and why I think they are such a formidable addition to any colony's defense. By the way, since we already captured the first Sightstealer from the last episode, we are not going to grab any more, at least not for the time being. Even if we can only do so every 2 days, studying these entities can become a time-consuming process, and Sightstealers also do not yield that much knowledge. What they do have going for them apparently though are numbers. This is arguably their biggest strength in my opinion, the fact that you just never know exactly how many of them there are, and fittingly enough, the game also does not warn us about any of them being on the map, at least not until they are ready to strike. And unfortunately, it also looks like with this pack almost defeated, we have another one coming in. Once again, no idea exactly how many of them, but it will most likely not take them too long to arrive. In the meantime, let's do what we can to clean up the place. Let's get Lifterbot Rico repaired. We have also acquired a shard and we are in the process of making a blue fur parka, the blue fur we acquired from the muffalo we killed last episode. And of excellent quality, it bumps Ellie's minimum comfortable temperature up to minus 67 degrees Celsius. That I think should be enough even for the coldest days out here on the sea ice. And it is also Ellie then who discovers the second strip of grey flesh. The first one was detected by Vulek, that however not necessarily any indication of who it comes from. Either way, let us study it now to find out who's the imposter. Now obviously simply studying it will not reveal that to us straight away. However, with 2 samples studied, we now have enough information to use the surgical inspection option, an operation that can detect the biosignature associated with this grey flesh. This operation, however, comes with 2 small problems. First of all, it requires a medical skill of 3 to be performed, and only Ellie and Vulek have a skill of that level. In addition, each operation also requires 2 units of medicine, so checking the entire colony will burn through our supplies very quickly. So to get us started, we will first inspect our prisoner. I would say before suspecting each other, our colonists would probably try to put the blame on somebody outside the colony, perhaps also as a way for Vulek and Ellie to divert suspicion away from them. Keep in mind that they are the 2 who detected the grey flesh in the first place. Now the results on our prisoner here come back negative. Vulek says that he has found no anomalies. However, and this is crucial, this does not necessarily mean that he is telling the truth. So, for example, if both Vulek and our prisoner were infected, it might be in Vulek's best interest to lie about the test results, which is why we are now going to have Ellie perform a double check, just to be on the safe side. Again, this does not reveal anything, however, this could also simply mean that both Vulek and Ellie are lying. For the time being, though, this is about the best result we can get. Nonetheless, with Vulek fast asleep, Ellie quickly sneaks up on him to perform an inspection of her own. As you can see in the social tab here, she still does not particularly like him. And again, with Vulek being the one to detect the initial strip of flesh, there is some suspicion there. Once again though, the results come back negative, so either Vulek is in the clear or the two of them are in cahoots. I suppose that's something that only time will tell. In the meantime, we have more pressing concerns because it looks like the next wave of Sightstealers is here, and this time we cannot count on the help of Vulek, who is completely out of it because of the anesthesia, so Maniac, the children and the ghouls will have to take care of this one all by themselves. Now thankfully it looks like especially those two ghouls are very capable of holding their own, although the situation that we find ourselves in here is about to get a bit more dicey, as at this point the Sightstealers are seemingly starting to come in from every direction, and well, I suppose that also means that Haulerbot Rico will have to do its fair share of lifting in this one, and as you can see, even that does not protect Ellie from suffering an unfortunate hit here. Eventually though, it looks like no further Sightstealer reinforcements are coming in, and while our two ghouls, Midnight and Jay, seem battered and bruised, it looks like the fight is won, at least for now. Once again then, we are taking no prisoners and leave no survivors. Killing off all the Sightstealers also results in one of them dropping another shard. I suppose those could come in handy down the line. Now at this point we've got Ellie taking some rest and being patched up by Vulek, which I think presents the perfect opportunity for our Sanguiphage to enact his revenge. With Ellie probably not suspecting a single thing, Vulek is now going to perform the inspection surgery on her too. Let's see if that brings up anything. In the meantime, Maniac starts butchering the Sightstealers. This gives us plenty of twisted meat and dread leather. The former should also allow us to substantially increase our chem fuel production. Vulek's surgical inspection then once again yielding no suspicious results, so while neither Vulek nor Ellie may be completely in the clear, I think it's time that we start looking elsewhere. As you can see then, at night our chem fuel production is increasing and we actually need quite a bit of it. As you may recall, we still have that faraway pirate camp that we need to attack, and in order to get there and back again, about 200 units of fuel are required for the drop pods. Nonetheless, our number one focus remains finding the source of the grey flesh, so at night we have Vulek taking a closer look at Maniac, who he has actually come to like a bit more than at the beginning of the series. However, Maniac also did have a clone corpse of him teleporting around for a good week, so it's not entirely unreasonable to be suspicious. Still, at least Vulek's inquiry here does not reveal anything, and before Ellie can double check, Maniac is already back up on his feet, and not only that, just in that moment, Nazim also returns home. Now, the chances that Nazim are infected are of course rather slim. After all, he has not even been with the colony for a week, which is why we are now putting him in quarantine, if you will. It should hopefully not take us too much longer to find out who's the source. At this point, you can also see it in the top left corner, we desperately need more heroot if we want to continue performing these operations. Thankfully, Maniac has just harvested a few batches of herbal medicine, and that means we continue to inspect, this time Elpis, who, as our resident void provoker, is of course not entirely unsuspicious. Once again though, the results come back negative, which is actually beginning to concern me a bit, because it could mean that it is Vulek after all who is infected, and if that's the case, then Ellie would probably be too, and at that point there would be no telling who we can still trust. At the very least, Ellie's inspection of her brother Elpis returns nothing too. Another attempt at interrogating our prisoner is equally unsuccessful, and so at this point there is only one thing left to do, and that is for Ellie to check Maniac, although since Vulek did not find anything earlier, I doubt that the results will be any different with her. And indeed, that's now all 4 colonists who have been here the last week, checked and double-checked, and none of them appear to be who the grey flesh originated from. So I think it's time that we start to consider some alternative options. For example, we have not yet checked our ghouls. After all, dropping strips of grey flesh, that would be awfully fitting. So let's get started here and have Vulek examine Midnight. And indeed, that finally reveals it. A Metalhorror has been hiding inside of Midnight. As we can see here, it was implanted before Midnight arrived at our colony. And since Volek successfully detected it, that also means that he is not infected. And that means neither is anyone else he checked. Now, what is a Metalhorror? Well, the comparison to a Scyther is often made, and it is quite fitting for the most part. Metalhorrors are extremely dangerous in melee combat. They also do not have any ranged attacks, so we want to make sure that our ghouls take the most of the damage here. They are also quite sturdy, although perhaps not as difficult to take down as the Revenant last episode. Still, at this point, together with the Revenant, I would consider them one of the most threatening entities we have encountered so far. The reason for that is not necessarily their combat strength, although that in itself is of course also problematic. It's more of the fact that in a medium-sized colony, actually detecting a Revenant can be quite the effort. If you want to be thorough, it's best to check every colonist twice, just the way we did, which obviously consumes a lot of time and medicine, not to mention that it also puts every inspected colonist out for a while because of the anesthesia. Now, with that being said, as you can see, we have successfully killed our first Metalhorror. It does not leave behind a corpse, but simply some bioferrite. Our ghoul Midnight has obviously also taken a good amount of damage from the Metalhorror bursting from inside of him, but due to his unnatural healing powers, he should recover in no time. At this point, we can then also allow Nazim to rejoin the colony. Again, it is pretty much a guarantee that he is not infected, although we might also want to check our ghoul Jay at some point, that is, once we have enough medicine again to do so. Now, on the bright side, all of this also means that our prisoner here is finally safe to be recruited, so we'll have Ellie do the honors, but before she can do so, we unlock proximity detectors, an absolutely essential device to detect invisible creatures like revenants and Sightstealers. Our first encounter with a Metalhorror has also unlocked the Metal Blood Serum. Very straightforward, drinking this will make the user more resistant to damage. I think it will be some time still until we unlock that. For now, let us continue with what we have started twice already: Void Sculptures and Advanced Psychic Rituals. A few moments later then, colonist number 6 and our first recruit of the series is officially here. So as always, chosen from the list of Patreon supporters in the naming rights tier and above, let us welcome Lauren to the colony, a fast-walking genie who will most likely become our full-time crafter, that is, if we find enough materials for her. Apart from that, she's also good at shooting and intellectual work, and she has become very good friends with Ellie. However, health-wise, there are a few things to consider. With a nasty bite scar on her left shoulder, she will not be as efficient of a crafter as she could be. Not to mention that a peg leg also somewhat neutralizes the fast runner trait. So there is some work to be done here. Conveniently enough though, we are a transhumanist colony, and Lauren has already been converted, so she should be more than open to any procedures. And we are immediately putting her to work at the tailoring bench, having her craft a dread leather parka. The great thing about her being a genie is that while officially her crafting skill is a level 18, it is actually only a level 10 with a +8 bonus, and for the purpose of gaining experience, the game also considers it a level 10, which means that Lauren will not actually need that much experience to advance to level 20, which again, behind the scenes, is actually only level 12. The parka then also quickly completed, and unsurprisingly of excellent quality. Being made from dread leather, it now goes on to Nazim, as dread leather is a material that normal colonists do not actually like wearing. Nazim, however, is a psychopath, so he does not care. And that is also why we are now tailoring an entire dread leather outfit for him, shirt, pants and parka, because apart from that potential mood penalty, dread leather is actually a pretty good material. In terms of its protective capabilities as armor, it is actually one of the best materials in the game, only topped by Thrumbofur, Hyperweave, Devil Strand and Rhino leather, all materials that we will not exactly have an easy time acquiring out here on the sea ice. Cold protection, meanwhile, is unfortunately not quite on the level of Thrumbofur, Megasloth wool or Muffalo wool, but as long as Nazim is wearing a parka, it should be adequate. Maniac then suffering a tantrum mental break, once again as a result of reading the Almanac of Shadows, that book honestly doing more harm than good at this point, so perhaps once we have unlocked the research that it helps us work towards, we might want to sell it. For now though, Maniac not doing a whole lot of damage, and we make progress on another research project, Psychite refining, and perhaps this has sparked some sort of chemical interest in our pawns. Either way, we will continue straight away with Wake Up production. Maniac's tantrum then coming to an end, and we can report that he has thankfully not destroyed any items or freed any entities. In the meantime, we are queuing up the construction of our first proximity detector, and just in that moment we receive another quest. This time it does not seem to be related to the Anomaly DLC, we just need to take out another pirate encampment. However, before we do so, we already have one on our list, and that is actually what we are setting out to attack very soon. Lauren meanwhile successfully constructs the proximity detector, another device hungry for at least a little bit of electricity, although hopefully also one that will keep us safe. And just as another day was about to begin, an eclipse shrouds us in darkness, so perhaps now would be the right moment to attack that first pirate camp. And for this assault, we are bringing our tough ghoul Jay alongside Vulek, Lauren and Nazim. Equipment-wise, 108 units of chem fuel and 4 components for the return trip, that is all they get, and a few moments later we can send the 4 of them on their way. Just as a reminder, 8 enemies await us, and a silent neuroformer as a reward. However, in another one of those Rimworld moments, that is not the only thing. Apparently, one of the pirates is actually the aunt of Elpis, and with that of course also of Ellie, although neither of the two have joined this expedition. The outpost itself then looking pretty straightforward, one single building, a turret, some sandbags and of course the 8 enemies. For the attack we thankfully have at least a bit of cover ourselves and a sniper rifle on Lauren. And since our enemies are unfortunately not too eager to walk into her range of fire, the solar generator will have to be the target instead. And as you can see, that is a reliable way of getting the pirates to move. Now, this here will most likely be a fairly straight-up shootout, and admittedly, 4 against 8, the numbers are not exactly in our favor. What we do have though is far superior weaponry, and a ghoul of course, also some cover, while our enemies have no other choice but to stand out in the open. But I guess that is the brutal beauty of sea ice combat for you. For now, our colonists are actually also doing a remarkable job of not getting hit, although shortly after I say that, Vulek catches his first bullet. At this point, we might then also want to send Jay forward just to get a few of the shooters tangled up in melee combat. To be honest, we probably should have done so a little bit earlier, but then again, ghouls are not invincible, and against 8 people with guns, even tough Jay here would probably have a hard time. Of those 8 people with guns, however, only 2 remain, and shortly after it's 0. And I checked the stats of those who did not die immediately. Some of them were solid, but not great, and either way, we just don't have the capacity to bring anyone back home with us. So let's quickly take out the turret here and then start disassembling the enemy base. As promised, the silent neuroformer is then also delivered immediately. We'll have to see who to give this to, there are a few options I think. Meanwhile, the enemy base is quickly stripped down and construction of 2 pod launchers begins. As we then put on the finishing touches on 2 drop pods and hope that nobody suffers a mental break, an exotic goods trader passes by. We'll take a look at their inventory shortly, but for now let's get those pods loaded. As you can see, with 4 people, or 3 people and 1 ghoul, we sadly don't have that much spare capacity, so 20 meals and about 50 units of steel are quickly loaded up. And with that, we are good to go, time to send our explorers back home. The eclipse still going strong, but I think they have earned themselves some rest. On the next morning then, the eclipse has vanished and we can do some trading. Not a lot, and it hurts me to do this, but we are selling a shard for some components. On the bright side, it seems to me like shards can be obtained somewhat reliably. Still, we are severely lagging behind in our search for another steel source, so this now becomes a top priority. Now, the silent neuroformer we just acquired, that will now be used by Ellie. I briefly thought about giving it to Maniac to make him a level 2 Psycaster, but I just don't believe that any of the level 2 Psycasts will really help us. Instead, thanks to the choice of Psycasts mod, Ellie can now grab the very useful Stun Psycast. Chunk Skip here would have also been very useful if it actually allowed you to create chunks out of nothing. Unfortunately though, it does not work that way, so it is pretty much useless out on the sea ice. So Stun it is, just like Maniac. At this point then, after successfully finding and eliminating a Metalhorror, after surviving an onslaught of Sightstealers, after recruiting a new member to the colony, and with an enemy outpost defeated, I think it's time for a party, a Pendrothian party. I would say that our colonists have reason enough to let loose once in a while. Our current situation, just like our power production, may not exactly be stable at the moment, but we are surviving, and that's about the best we can hope for. And so, despite Lauren suffering a mental break from being exhausted due to last night's raid, the Pendrothian party still comes to a rather successful end, and with another ideology development point earned, I think so will today's episode. There is one final thing we can do here before we wrap things up, and that is to give Lauren that bionic arm we grabbed a few episodes back. That will now replace her torn up shoulder and increase her manipulation stat, and in terms of implants and body part replacements, it actually puts her at the forefront of our transhumanist movement. And with that, we can now transition to the outro. No fan art this week, but that's because I pre-produced this episode, which I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. And if you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course also go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.